Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Finn Callahan moved to the suburbs to rebuild his life, he never expected a battle with the local HOA president, Karen Harper. Her relentless campaign to enforce rules on his independent property escalates into sabotage, public humiliation, and a courtroom showdown. This is a story of resilience, justice, and standing tall. Finn Callahan, a resilient and determined man in his early 40s, found himself at a crossroads in life. After a difficult divorce, he sought solace and a fresh start away from the bustling city. The perfect opportunity presented itself in the form of his late parents' house, a charming mid-century home nestled in the peaceful suburbs. The house, although in need of some repair, held a treasure trove of memories and the promise of new beginnings. The neighborhood itself was a patchwork of contrasts. On one side were independent homeowners who took pride in their autonomy, preferring to maintain their properties without interference. On the other, members of the local Homeowners Association, HOA, led by its president, Karen Harper, ruled with an iron fist. Karen, a woman in her 50s, was known for her commanding presence, sharp tongue, and relentless enforcement of HOA bylaws. Her insistence on conformity and control had long divided the community, with some praising her organizational skills and others quietly resenting her authoritarian approach. When Finn moved in, he immediately threw himself into renovating the house. He replaced the old shingles, revived the overgrown garden, and repainted the walls in shades that evoked a feeling of warmth and stability. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Several neighbors complimented him, expressing their relief that the house, which had remained vacant for years, was being given a second life. Among these neighbors was Doug Miller, an elderly man who lived across the street and was a vocal critic of the HOA. Doug warned Finn to be cautious of Karen, describing her as someone who couldn't tolerate nonconformity, especially from those who chose not to join the HOA. True to Doug's warning, Karen wasted no time in approaching Finn. Just a week after he had moved in, she arrived unannounced at his doorstep, clipboard in hand, and a disarming smile that barely concealed her underlying motives. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA and extended an invitation for Finn to join. While she highlighted the benefits of membership, shared resources, community events, and enhanced neighborhood harmony, Finn politely declined. "I appreciate the offer, Karen, but I prefer to handle things on my own," he said with a warm but firm smile. Karen's expression faltered for a moment before she recovered, plastering on her signature grin. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me," she said, before walking away, her eyes scanning his yard with thinly veiled judgment. Finn felt an unease settle over him, but he brushed it off as an overreaction. For the next several months, Finn settled into his new life. He enjoyed the tranquility of the neighborhood, the privacy of his backyard, and the company of his loyal dog, Max. He occasionally waved to neighbors, built a friendly rapport with Doug, and felt a sense of accomplishment with each home improvement project he completed. But beneath the surface of his idyllic new life, tension brewed. Karen, unsatisfied with Finn's refusal, began her subtle campaign. It started with pointed remarks during casual encounters, such as, "Your lawn looks a little longer than the standard we maintain in this neighborhood," or, "Most of us find it easier to keep things uniform with HOA guidelines." Finn, unwilling to cause trouble, simply nodded politely and went on his way. He was unaware that Karen had already set her sights on him as her next target. For Karen, Finn's independence wasn't just an annoyance, it was a threat to her authority. And in her eyes, every house in the neighborhood, including Finn's, needed to fall in line. Little did Finn know, the peaceful days in his new home were numbered. The quiet tension with Karen would soon escalate into a full-blown battle, testing his resolve and dragging him into the intricate web of power struggles, community divisions, and personal vendettas that define the HOA's grip on the neighborhood. As autumn settled in, Finn began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere around him. One crisp morning, he found an envelope tucked into his mailbox without a postage stamp, an official-looking letter emblazoned with the HOA's logo. Inside was a notice stating that he owed a sum of $500 in overdue membership fees and fines for various violations, including failure to maintain his lawn according to HOA standards and unauthorized exterior paint colors. Confused, Finn shook his head. He wasn't a member of the HOA, so how could he owe them anything? Deciding it was a simple misunderstanding, Finn dialed the number listed on the letter. After several rings, a curt voice answered, "Maple Grove, HOA. This is Linda speaking." "Hello, this is Finn Callahan. I received a letter about overdue fees, but there must be some mistake. I'm not a member of the HOA," Finn explained politely. A pause followed before Linda responded tersely, "If you reside within the Maple Grove boundaries, you are automatically subject to HOA regulations and fees." Finn felt a knot forming in his stomach. "I was under the impression that my property is exempt. I've reviewed my deed, and there's no mention of HOA obligations. Failure to comply will result in penalties." Linda interrupted sharply. "You have until the end of the month." The line went dead. Perplexed and slightly unnerved, Finn decided to consult his attorney, Mark Peterson. Mark reviewed the documents and confirmed that Finn's property was indeed not under the HOA's jurisdiction. "It appears they're overstepping their boundaries," Mark noted. "I'll draft a formal notice to cease their demands. In the meantime, keep records of any further communication." Relieved to have professional support, Finn tried to put the matter out of his mind. However, the peace was short-lived. A week later, he returned home to find a bright orange notice plastered on his front door. "Final warning. Immediate action required." It cited more alleged violations and threatened legal action. That weekend, as Finn was repairing his backyard fence, he noticed Karen standing on the sidewalk watching him intently. Her gaze was icy, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Deciding to address the issue directly, Finn approached her. "Karen, I'd like to clarify that I'm not part of the HOA, and these notices are becoming quite troubling." She smiled thinly. "Finn, property ownership here comes with responsibilities. We all must contribute to maintain the neighborhood standards." "I understand the importance of community," Finn replied evenly, "but my property isn't within the HOA's governance. My attorney has confirmed this." Karen's eyes flashed with irritation. "Attorneys can interpret documents in many ways. Perhaps yours is mistaken. Ignoring community guidelines isn't neighborly, and it won't be tolerated." Before Finn could respond, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him with a sense of foreboding. Over the next few days, Finn noticed unfamiliar cars slowly driving past his house, their occupants seemingly taking photos. One evening, his mailbox was stuffed with flyers outlining the HOA's rules and the consequences of non-compliance. It was becoming clear that Karen was mobilizing against him. Determined not to be intimidated, Finn doubled down on his home projects, ensuring everything was up to code. If not the HOA's code, then certainly the city's. He painted his fence, trimmed his hedges, and made sure his property's appearance was impeccable. One afternoon, Doug approached him while he was working in the yard. "Looks like Karen's got her sights set on you," he remarked grimly. Finn sighed. "I just don't understand why she's so insistent." Doug nodded knowingly. "She's been trying to extend the HOA's reach for years. Those of us who resist become her targets. Stand your ground. You're in the right." That night, as Finn was unwinding, he heard voices outside. Peering through the curtains, he saw Karen and a group of HOA members gathered on the sidewalk, pointing at his house and discussing animatedly. Though their words were indistinct, the disapproving tones were unmistakable. Feeling the weight of their scrutiny, Finn knew he had to prepare for whatever came next. The quiet tension had evolved into open hostility, and it was clear that Karen would not back down easily. Little did he know, the conflict was about to take a much more aggressive turn, testing his patience and resilience in ways he hadn't anticipated. The tension between Finn and the HOA, led by Karen, reached a boiling point one sunny Saturday afternoon. Finn had invited a few friends over for a casual backyard barbecue to celebrate completing the latest round of home improvements. The warm air was filled with the scent of grilled food, laughter, and the faint sound of music playing in the background. For a moment, Finn allowed himself to relax, enjoying the sense of normalcy that had been missing since Karen's campaign against him began. However, the tranquility shattered when Karen marched up the driveway, uninvited, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the property with exaggerated disdain. Finn noticed her too late to intervene. By the time he reached the front of the house, she was already at the gate, drawing the attention of his guests. "Finn," she called loudly, her voice cutting through the cheerful chatter. "We need to have a word, right now." Caught off guard but unwilling to cause a scene, Finn stepped forward, lowering his voice in an attempt to keep the conversation private. "Karen, now isn't a good time. I'm having people over. Whatever this is about, it can wait. Karen ignored him, her voice rising. It absolutely cannot wait. Do you know how long it's been since you've paid your HOA dues? 6 months, and that's not even counting the violations piling up on this property. The chatter among his guests quieted as all eyes turned to Finn and Karen. Embarrassment crawled up Finn's neck as Karen continued her tirade, gesturing toward his house as though presenting evidence. If you think you can ignore your responsibilities and drag down the neighborhood, think again. This is a community, and we all have to contribute. Finn's attempts to interject were futile. Karen had the attention of the crowd and clearly intended to use it. She pivoted slightly, addressing his guests now. I'm sorry to interrupt your gathering, but everyone here deserves to know the truth. The HOA will not tolerate freeloaders. If he doesn't pay up by the end of next week, we'll be left with no choice but to escalate this to the courts. A heavy silence hung in the air as Karen finally stopped, looking satisfied with herself. Finn's guests shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to say or do. Finn felt a mix of anger and humiliation. Taking a deep breath, he responded as calmly as he could manage. Karen, he said firmly, his voice steady despite his anger, I am not a member of the HOA. I've told you this before, and I have the documents to prove it. You have no authority over my property, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop disrupting my life. And now, my gathering. But Karen didn't stick around to hear his reply. She turned sharply on her heel, muttering something under her breath, and marched back to her car. The guests stared at Finn, wide-eyed, as the engine roared to life and Karen's vehicle disappeared down the street. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, one of Finn's friends broke the silence. What was that about? Finn sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's a long story. Let's just get back to the barbecue. Though his friends tried to lighten the mood, the damage was done. Karen's public display had cast a shadow over the day. For Finn, the humiliation solidified one thing. Karen's actions weren't just a nuisance anymore. They were a calculated attempt to ruin his reputation and force him into submission. As the evening wore on, Finn quietly resolved to push back harder than ever. This was no longer just about his home. It was about standing up to the overreach of someone who thought she could control his life. The following weekend began as uneventfully as any other. Finn woke up early, brewed his coffee, and prepared to take Max for a morning walk. He let Max out onto the lawn while he laced up his boots. Moments later, a strange noise reached his ears, a faint rustling sound followed by an odd thud. When Finn opened the door, he was met with a wave of stench, so overpowering that he instinctively stepped back. Covering his nose, he stepped outside to find Max pawing at a pile of trash near the edge of the driveway. Finn's eyes widened in disbelief. His once pristine yard had been turned into a grotesque landfill. Scattered across the lawn were heaps of garbage, food waste, broken furniture, bags of what appeared to be construction debris, and even several discarded tires. A sticky, foul-smelling liquid pooled near the garage door, where a plastic bottle lay in Max's jaws. Panicked, Finn called for his dog, but Max refused to drop the bottle, letting out a pitiful whimper. Rushing inside, Finn grabbed his phone and gloves before coaxing the bottle from Max's mouth. He noticed it was coated in some sort of industrial adhesive that had stuck to the dog's muzzle. Finn's heart sank as he realized the potential danger. Without wasting a moment, he called a local veterinary clinic and arranged an emergency visit. As he prepared to leave, Finn took a moment to examine the extent of the damage. Trash had been intentionally scattered across every part of his property, from the front yard to the driveway, and even around his backyard gate. The scope of the mess was staggering, far too large to be the result of random vandalism. His suspicions solidified when he noticed something odd near the curb, tire tracks leading from the street to his driveway. The tracks were deep, suggesting a heavy vehicle had recently entered. Finn hurried back inside and accessed the recordings from the security cameras he had installed weeks earlier. The footage confirmed his worst fears. At 3:12 a.m., a large garbage truck had pulled up in front of his house. The driver tilted the truck's bed, releasing a deluge of trash onto Finn's lawn. Shortly after, 3 masked individuals emerged from the truck, spreading the garbage and pouring sticky liquid over the debris. They worked swiftly and deliberately before driving away, the truck's license plate clearly visible on the camera feed. Furious, Finn sent the footage to his attorney, Mark, who responded within minutes. "This isn't just vandalism," Mark stated. "This is malicious intent, and the plate gives us a solid lead. I'll begin tracing the truck's owner immediately." But the chaos didn't stop there. By mid-morning, neighbors began gathering near the edge of Finn's property, attracted by the foul odor and the shocking sight of the mess. Whispers quickly turned into murmurs of disapproval, and Finn overheard phrases like, "How could anyone let their yard get like this?" Then, as if summoned by the spectacle, Karen arrived. She stepped out of her car with her usual self-assured stride, surveying the mess with a shake of her head. "Neighbors," she called out, her voice carrying over the small crowd. "This is exactly what happens when someone refuses to cooperate with the HOA. It's a shame to see our beautiful neighborhood tarnished like this." Finn clenched his fists as he approached. "Karen, I'm sure you're enjoying the drama, but this wasn't my doing. I've got footage proving this was a deliberate act." Karen's expression didn't falter. Instead, she feigned concern. "Oh, Finn, I didn't mean to accuse you, but it's clear that a lack of adherence to community standards can lead to, well, unfortunate situations." She turned back to the neighbors, her tone shifting to persuasive authority. "This is why we need everyone to work together as part of the HOA. Incidents like this wouldn't happen if we all followed the same rules." Finn stared in disbelief as Karen effectively used his plight as a platform to bolster her own agenda. Frustrated but determined, he called Max and quietly left through the back gate, making his way to the veterinarian. At the clinic, Finn explained the situation, and the veterinarian carefully removed the bottle from Max's mouth, documenting the adhesive for evidence. After ensuring Max was safe, Finn arranged for a professional cleaning crew to clear the trash and neutralize the odor. He also instructed them to save receipts and photographs of the cleanup for his legal case. By the time Finn returned home, the cleaning crew had begun their work. As he watched them methodically clear the mess, he vowed to hold the perpetrators accountable. Mark called with an update, revealing that the truck was registered to a local HOA member, a fact that tied the act directly to Karen's circle of influence. Though exhausted, Finn felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about restoring his property, it was about standing up to Karen's bullying once and for all. The battle had escalated, but Finn was ready to fight back with everything he had. Finn returned home later that evening, exhausted but resolute. The sight of his yard, now mostly cleared of the mountain of garbage, reignited his determination. While the cleaning crew worked to erase the physical evidence of the attack, Finn focused on building his case. He spent hours reviewing the security footage again, ensuring he didn't miss any crucial details. By the next morning, Finn's attorney, Mark, called with a significant breakthrough. The garbage truck captured on video was registered to a local construction company owned by a man named Roy Baxter, a known member of the HOA and close ally of Karen Harper. "I spoke with Roy," Mark explained. "At first, he denied everything, but when I mentioned the video, he caved. He admitted to being hired to teach you a lesson, but refused to name who was behind it." This confirmation gave Finn the ammunition he needed. With Mark's guidance, he prepared a formal complaint to the police, submitting the footage, receipts from the cleanup, and Max's veterinary report as evidence. Within hours, officers visited Roy for questioning, putting additional pressure on the HOA member to cooperate. Meanwhile, Finn revisited the footage with a sharp eye. The masked figures who spread the garbage didn't directly implicate Karen, but their methodical approach suggested coordination. He forwarded the findings to Mark, who began preparing a legal strategy to connect Karen to the incident. The next step was damage control. Finn called an informal meeting with a few neighbors he trusted, including Doug, who had always supported him. Over coffee, he shared the footage and explained the situation in full. "This isn't just about me," Finn told them. "This kind of harassment could happen to anyone who opposes Karen's HOA agenda." Doug nodded. "She's been pulling stunts like this for years. It's about time someone stood up to her." Word began to spread quietly among the neighbors. A few, who had been skeptical of Finn after Karen's public accusations, started changing their tone. Some even approached him directly, apologizing for jumping to conclusions and offering their support. At the same time, Finn took Mark's advice to protect himself further. He upgraded his security system, adding additional cameras to cover blind spots around his property. He also posted signs at the edge of his yard, warning against trespassing and notifying would-be intruders of video surveillance. Despite the progress, Karen didn't back down. A few days later, Finn found another letter in his mailbox, this time accusing him of being a public nuisance and threatening to report him to environmental authorities for illegal waste disposal. Finn laughed at the absurdity of the claim, but he kept the letter as evidence of Karen's escalating tactics. Mark called with another update. Roy Baxter had agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. He admitted that Karen had orchestrated the entire plan, convincing him and a few other HOA members that dumping trash on Finn's property would send a clear message. Roy's confession was the final piece of the puzzle. With this new evidence, Mark prepared to file a lawsuit against Karen and the HOA for harassment, defamation, and property damage. Finn knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of control. The fight was no longer one-sided. Karen's overreach was finally catching up with her, and Finn was ready to face her head-on. Though tensions in the neighborhood remained high, Finn's resolve never wavered. With his legal case gaining traction and his neighbors beginning to rally behind him, he felt more determined than ever to hold Karen accountable for her actions. This wasn't just about his home anymore. It was a stand for fairness and freedom against unchecked authority. The morning of the police investigation into Karen Harper's involvement was tense. Finn watched from his window as 2 patrol cars pulled up to her house. Officers knocked on the door, clipboard in hand, while Karen stepped out, her confident demeanor faltering for the first time. By now, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers about the garbage dump and Roy Baxter's confession. Karen's closest allies had grown distant, wary of being implicated in her schemes. Still, she maintained an air of defiance, claiming she had nothing to hide. Later that afternoon, Finn received a call from Mark. "We've got her," the attorney said. The police found records of her texts and emails to Roy, detailing the entire plan. She not only authorized the trash dump, but also coordinated it with others in the HOA. With her back against the wall, Karen lashed out in desperation. She summoned a special HOA meeting, inviting members to rally against Finn. Finn decided to attend, bringing his evidence and Mark for legal support. The community center buzzed with tension as Karen opened the meeting, attempting to spin the narrative. "Neighbors, we are under attack by someone who refuses to respect our values," she declared, pointing directly at Finn. But before she could continue, Finn stood. "Enough, Karen. I've tolerated your harassment, your lies, and your schemes, but this ends now." He connected his laptop to the projector and played the damning footage of the garbage truck, followed by copies of Karen's messages to Roy. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face turned pale, her composure crumbling. "This is an invasion of privacy. He's twisting the facts," she stammered. Mark stepped in, calmly stating, "The facts are clear. This is harassment, destruction of property, and defamation. Ms. Harper, you will face legal consequences." The room erupted into chaos as neighbors demanded explanations from Karen, many openly voicing their disgust. For the first time, Karen had no control. She stormed out defeated, leaving Finn standing firm, his evidence silencing her once and for all. The power dynamic in the neighborhood had shifted irrevocably, and Finn knew the battle was almost won. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Karen Harper, visibly diminished from her once imposing presence, sat flanked by her attorney. Finn, calm and resolute, sat across from her, supported by his lawyer, Mark, and several neighbors who had come to testify on his behalf. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark presented the security footage of the trash dump, Roy Baxter's signed confession, and Karen's incriminating emails, which outlined her plan to intimidate Finn into compliance. Witnesses took the stand, including Doug and other neighbors who testified about Karen's history of coercion and her obsessive need to expand HOA authority. Karen's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The judge not only ruled in Finn's favor, but also ordered Karen to pay substantial damages for property destruction, emotional distress, and legal fees. Additionally, the HOA faced penalties for negligence in allowing Karen to misuse its resources. When the verdict was read, Finn felt a wave of relief. Karen's reign of unchecked power was officially over, and his name was cleared. Justice had prevailed, sending a clear message: bullying and intimidation would not stand. Months after the courtroom drama, life in the neighborhood had changed dramatically. Karen had stepped down as HOA president, and her once loyal allies distanced themselves from her. The HOA underwent a complete restructuring, with new leadership focused on fairness and transparency. Karen, burdened by legal fees and a ruined reputation, quietly moved away, leaving behind a community determined to heal from her toxic influence. For Finn, the victory was more than just a legal triumph. It was a reclaiming of his peace and dignity. His yard, now restored, became a symbol of resilience. Max happily roamed the property again, his tail wagging as if sensing the newfound calm. Neighbors who had once avoided Finn now waved warmly or stopped by for friendly chats. Doug, ever supportive, often reminisced about how Finn's courage had inspired the neighborhood to stand up for itself. Some residents even organized a block party to celebrate the changes, with Finn as the guest of honor. Sitting on his freshly painted porch one evening, Finn reflected on how the ordeal had tested his resolve. The fight hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. He had stood his ground not just for himself, but for the principle that no one should be forced to submit to unjust authority. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Finn felt a quiet satisfaction. His home, once a refuge for healing, had become a testament to the power of perseverance. He knew he had found more than a fresh start. He had found his place.